Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I went camping earlier this spring deep in the woods, about 4 hours north of home. There was a small lake I always liked going to. It felt like a hidden place no one else knew about. Each time I visited, I never saw a soul. It was peaceful, surrounded by trees and a stretch of soft grass around the water. You could see the entire shoreline from any point along the edge. The first day I arrived, I unpacked and got everything set up like I always did. Not long after, I noticed someone coming out of the forest on the far side of the lake. He started pitching a tent, looking like any ordinary camper. He kept to himself for a while as the sun began to go down. Eventually, I saw him walking the edge of the lake toward me. When he reached my camp, he smiled and said his name was William. He told me he wasn't sure if I had seen him earlier, but he saw me from across the lake and wanted to say hello. He mentioned how rare it was to meet anyone out there, saying he usually had the place to himself too. We talked for a while. He was friendly and about the same age as me. We both liked the quiet, off-the-grid feeling that place had. After maybe half an hour, he walked back to his tent as the last bit of light disappeared. That night was uneventful, but the next day, we hung out by the lake. William brought over some beers, and we spent hours talking and just enjoying the quiet. As night came again, we each went back to our own camps. I sat by my fire later on, thinking how lucky I was to have met someone like William. He seemed like the perfect camping friend, someone I might even return here with someday. But as I was about to put the fire out and head to sleep, I noticed him walking around the lake. His fire had been out for a while, so I assumed he was asleep already. But there he was, coming back toward my camp. When he got close, I noticed something felt off. I asked if everything was okay, and he smiled, acting normal again. He said he'd found a spot with an amazing view and asked if I wanted to check it out. I hesitated, saying it felt too late to go hiking, but he insisted the view was only special at night. His excitement made me feel like I couldn't say no. I followed him around the lake and into the woods. There was no trail. The way he moved so confidently through the dark made it clear he knew the path well. We walked for a while before he slowed down. He pointed ahead, grinning. When I stepped past him to see, I expected a view, but instead found an old, broken-down RV. It looked abandoned for years, covered in moss and rust. I turned back to William, confused. His face had changed. It was blank and cold. He didn't look like the same guy. I asked him what was going on, but he said nothing. Panic started rising in my chest. I heard a metal creak behind me. I turned just in time to see someone else running at me from the RV. I took off. I didn't look back. I just ran. I could hear them chasing me. I pushed myself harder than I ever had until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. But now I was lost. Deep in the woods with no idea which direction to go. I walked all night, watching the trees until the sky started to lighten. Eventually, I made it back to the lake. I stayed hidden in the trees as I looked at my campsite. Everything was gone. My tent, my gear, everything. It looked like no one had ever camped there at all. I got back to the trail and walked until I reached my car. Later, I filed a report with the police, but they never found anything. Or maybe they didn't bother looking. I still don't know what those two had planned. I try not to think about it. All I know is I ran before they could show me. And I don't think I'll ever go back. I was young and broke, desperate for any place I could afford on my own. I'd just finished college and started working a job that barely paid above minimum wage. I began searching for studio apartments, but it quickly became clear that even the cheapest ones were out of reach. After exhausting the usual rental sites, I turned to Craigslist. I knew the risks, but a friend had found a decent deal there before, so I gave it a shot. The first few days turned up nothing promising. There were a lot of listings, but none were close by or within my budget. Then one afternoon, I refreshed the page and saw something new. A studio in a small apartment building only a few miles from me. The photos were low quality and hard to see clearly, but the description sounded fine, and the price was exactly what I could manage. I messaged the owner, and he replied almost immediately. We set up a tour for later that evening. From the messages, he came off as completely professional, polite, and easy to talk to. Nothing about it seemed off. A few hours later, I drove over to the address he'd given me. I knew the neighborhood wasn't great. It had a rough reputation, but it was cheap, and I didn't think much of it at the time. The apartment building looked old and worn down. I parked on the street, walked up to the entrance, and texted the guy to say I had arrived. When I didn't see anyone waiting for me, I buzzed the door. It unlocked a moment later, and I stepped inside. There was a staircase in the center and 2 rooms on the ground floor. Before I could even check for apartment numbers, a voice called down from above, saying they were on the 3rd floor. I figured it was him and made my way up. As I climbed the stairs, something started to feel wrong. If he was expecting me, why hadn't he come to meet me at the door? Still, I kept going. On the top floor, there was a short hallway with 2 doors. One was open, so I walked toward it. Inside stood a man who greeted me, shook my hand, and invited me in. But the second I stepped inside, I was confused. This wasn't a studio. The place looked completely lived in. There was furniture, a TV, dishes, even leftover food on the counter. I asked if someone was still living there, trying to keep my tone polite. He laughed and said everything would be gone by tomorrow. I forced a smile, but his answer didn't sit right with me. He walked deeper into the apartment, pointing out random features, trying to sell the place. But the more I looked, the more it was obvious this was a full apartment with multiple rooms. The listing had claimed it was a studio. There was no way this could be the right place, not for that price. I think he noticed I was growing suspicious because he suddenly stopped talking and turned toward one of the back rooms. He opened the door slightly and motioned for me to take a look inside. Just as I started to respond, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen, and my stomach dropped. It was a message from the real man on Craigslist, asking if I was still coming to view the apartment. I looked up and locked eyes with the man in front of me. For a second, neither of us said anything. He knew I had figured it out. I backed up slowly, then turned and walked quickly out of the apartment. I rushed down the stairs and out of the building. He didn't follow me, at least not that I noticed. I jumped into my car and drove off without ever looking back. I never replied to the real guy, and I never checked Craigslist again. I don't know who that man was or what he had planned, but I came far too close to finding out. I live in a duplex in a quiet little community. After more than a year here, I never had anything worth complaining about. The neighbors on the other side had moved out not long after I arrived, and since then, that half of the building stayed completely empty. It didn't even feel like I was living in a shared space. The place was always silent and still. One night after work, I got home a bit late with some takeout, turned on the TV, and sat down to eat. Everything was normal until I heard a soft thud come from the wall behind me. I paused, thinking it might have been nothing, but then it happened again. I muted the TV and stood up. The sound had come from the shared wall with the empty unit. I went to the window and peeked outside. No cars in the driveway, no lights on next door, nothing out of place. Curious, I pressed my ear to the wall. Faint sounds of footsteps and creaking doors reached me. It was like someone was slowly walking through the empty unit, opening doors, checking things. I knew no one had moved in. I'd never seen any sign of activity over there in all the time I'd lived here. The fact that it was late at night made it even stranger. After a few minutes of listening, I went back to the couch, unsure of what else to do. I stayed up watching TV until I eventually went to bed. But I had trouble falling asleep. Every small sound put me on edge. Then, I heard the thud again. This time, it was louder. I sat up and stared at the wall. It happened once more, followed by the soft creak of footsteps on the floor below. A wave of fear came over me. I moved quietly toward the bedroom door, but before I could open it, I saw a shadow fall across the floor underneath. Someone was in the hallway. I froze, backed away, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. I turned the volume down low and dialed the police, whispering the address. As I tried to explain what was happening, I stopped speaking. The shadow was still moving. Slow, deliberate steps just beyond the door. The person was pacing the hallway, staying close to my room. They weren't making much noise, but it was clear they knew I was inside. I stayed silent, barely breathing, hoping the police would arrive quickly. Then, the footsteps changed. They got heavier. Whoever it was started walking faster, no longer being careful. Doors were being thrown open, one after another. When they reached mine, the handle turned sharply. They tried to force it, pushing against it a few times, but gave up and moved on. I heard them going through the rest of the place before finally heading downstairs and leaving. The police showed up a while later, but by then it was over. Some small things had been taken, but it didn't make sense. It wasn't about stealing. Whoever had broken in had moved through the place like they were looking for something specific. They had known I was home. It felt personal. Weeks passed, and I tried to forget. Then one day while cleaning the spare bedroom, I noticed something strange under a nightstand. A small camera. Hidden carefully out of sight. I took it to the police, but there was no way to trace where it came from or see what was on it. Whether it was meant to spy on me or for something worse, I'll never know. It's been months since that night. No new signs, no clues. But sometimes I wonder if they've come back already. Maybe they're still watching. Maybe next time I won't hear the footsteps in time. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.